I'm Holly with Stella Mari's Quilts. Welcome to our series on 50 blocks for 50 states, following along with the designs from this book. Check out the description box below for more information about that, as well as the link to the pattern we've written that has our adaptations and step-by-step instructions for today's block, which is the block for Rhode Island. So grab your cup of tea and let's get started. For the Rhode Island block, we're going to need some 5.5-inch squares. We'll need 2 of our light and 1 of our dark. We'll need some 2-inch squares. That'll be 8 light and 4 dark. We're going to need 4 3.5 by 2-inch rectangles of our dark, 1 3.5-inch square of our light, and 4 4.5-inch squares of our medium. To get started, we're going to work with the center unit. That's going to be a star block. So we're going to start by making some flying geese units out of our dark and our light squares. I've already gone ahead and drawn a line from corner to corner on the back of my light squares, and I'm going to arrange those on my dark fabric here so that one point is to the center and one is to the edge here. I'm going to sew on the drawn line on all 4 of these. I've gone ahead and pressed the triangle back, and then we're going to just trim away 1/4 inch from the seam so that we have our seam allowance. Then we'll go ahead and add our remaining square to the other side so that the points intersect in the center, and we'll sew on that drawn line on these 4 pieces as well. Now that I've sewn on the drawn line, I've pressed it back, and then we'll just trim away that 1/4 inch seam allowance again. You can use your scissors if you want, or your rotary cutter. Either one works. And now we're going to lay out the center star. We've got our 3.5-inch square in the middle. Our flying geese units are going to go on the sides so that the point is towards the center. And then we will put our 2-inch dark squares in all 4 corners. This will just be sewn together then as a 9 patch. Essentially, I'm going to add the squares to the sides of this row and this row. And in the center here, I'm going to add my flying geese to the center. When I'm doing that, I'm going to sew with my piece unit on top. That way I can watch where my seams intersect here and make sure that I'm on this side of the point so that when I press it back, my points will still be perfect. Go ahead and sew this whole unit together and be right back. And here's our center star unit. When I was doing this, I pressed my top and bottom rows out toward the dark squares and the center in toward the center. That way, when I went to put it together, the seams would nest and it would be easier to keep those points nice and crisp in all of the corners. So let's move on to the next step. The next step is to work on our outer portion. For that, we're going to need our 4 medium squares. We're also going to need our light and dark 5.5-inch squares. I'm going to go ahead and just stack all of these up together because they get cut the same way. Will this really work? Oh, look at that, it will. I'm just going to go ahead and cut these in half diagonally both directions. It's 1 and 2. I'm going to put my darks aside because we're going to use those next. We're going to start with our lights. I'm just going to take 2 to show you quick. We are going to take our medium square here, and on 2 sides that are adjacent, we're going to sew the light triangles to the sides. Now, you might want to keep a note that this is a straight grain because of the way we cut it, but these are going to be bias. If you have a hard time working with bias, spraying with starch and pressing before you cut is going to help prevent any stretching. But I chose to do it this way because when we get to the final construction, the outside edges will all be straight grain, and that'll make it easier to put the block together with other blocks. So to put these two pieces on the sides, what we're going to do is we're going to find our center. I'm going to fold this in half and just finger press. And then I'm going to fold this in half, finger press, and I'm finger pressing. This went right sides together, this one's going wrong sides together. That way that finger press is just going to nest together right there in the center. And then I'm just going to sew my 1/4 inch seam and then press it back. And then we'll add the second one doing the same thing of finding our center, nest them together, and then sew. All right, so I've sewn the triangle to one side on all 4 of my medium squares. And now I'm going to add a second triangle to the other side. When I pressed mine back, I did press it towards the dark. It's a little counter the direction that it wants to go. It really does want to go towards the triangle this way. But that does mean when I'm folding it to find my centers, I do need to make sure I'm finding my center from the edge of that medium fabric. So I do have to kind of push that back to find my center. And then I can add my center, pressing to my triangle and put it lined up, and then sew that down. If you wanted to trim away the extra point that you have on here, you can at this point or at this step, and just trim that away with either your ruler and rotary cutter, or a pair of scissors will work just fine. It's not a long distance to go. So I'm going to go ahead and add the second triangles to all of these. So now I've got the second triangle added to all of my medium squares, and it's a little counterintuitive, but you do want to press towards your darker fabric on this one. It's going to help with the next step to have the triangles in there full all the way down. So I'm going to put 2 of these aside, and we're going to use them later for our block construction. And then I'm going to take 2, and these 2 we're going to add our dark triangles here. I'll just put one in the center. We're going to add a dark triangle here and a dark triangle on this side. Now, a reminder, this is a bias edge right here. So when you're doing this, be careful. Just put the right angled corners here together and sew carefully all the way down on both sides of this. If you need to use some starch, again, starch and starching your fabric and pressing it before you cut will help prevent stretching on these bias edges if that's something that you struggle with. So I'm going to take these 2 to my sewing machine. I'm going to add those triangles, and then we'll come back for the block layout. Here's what that unit now looks like, and now it's time to lay out the block. So these are actually going to be put on our ends and our corners here. Just slide that down a little bit. We will have our star on point in the center. Our medium squares with only the 2 lights are going to go in 2 corners. And then ours with the darks will go in the other 2 corners. To sew this together, I'm going to do the center first. So I'm going to take these 2 pieces and sew it to the star. When I'm doing that, I'm going to sew I'm going to decide which way is going to work best for me, but I'm going to look at how much seam allowance I have. And it looks like on this one, I've got a pretty good seam allowance. So I'll probably sew from this side to watch my points of my star legs here and sew that together. So I'll sew 1 on either side of that center star. And then after I've sewn that together, I'll sew these two triangle units, finding the centers and lining that up. I'll also have the seam here to nest as well. Okay, so I thought I'd show you a little bit more of the progress on this one. So I've sewn my pieces to the sides, and because I flipped it over and did it from the other side, I was able to make sure I caught all of my star legs and my points are good there. This seam allowance was good enough that I wasn't worried about losing my points. Now on the outside corners here, I pressed it back towards the dark. So when I pressed this, I pressed it towards the center star. So when I put them together, some extra thread there. When I put them together, I can nest the seams at these points here and help keep everything lined up nice and straight. My center should just fall in the center by keeping these points where they should be. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those two on. And here's the finished Rhode Island block. Just a couple notes about this. There are a lot of bias seams in the center here. All of these sides of the triangles are bias. So when pressing it, you want to just be careful you don't stretch. Again, using starch is going to help with making sure that they don't get distorted. I'm also going to trim off my little dog ears along the edges before I call it completely done. But the way that the piecing was done does make sure that all of these edges along the outside edge of the block are straight grain, which is going to make it easier to put together with the other blocks in the series down the road. Thank you for joining me today working on our Rhode Island block. I hope you enjoyed this and you continue journeying through all 50 states with us through this series. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out when the next block is released. Until next time, cheers and happy quilting.